All right, welcome back to the Utah CTO Show. This is Chris, and I'm here with Brett, my co-host.
Hello.
And today we have a special guest, Scott Schlegel of Chargeback. Scott, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Appreciate you being here very much. You and I actually met, probably a couple years ago, or a year ago anyway, on the kind of the Kickstart CTO group.
That's right, like some meetups too, right?
Yeah, we had some meetups together, and so thank you so much for coming and being on the show with us. And you got tons of experience. In fact, a couple of the times that we've met were really useful to me, and I thought this would be a fantastic way to get some of the things that I learned out to a little bit larger audience. So thanks.
Yeah, it's nice of you to say. Thank you.
So wanted to get right into the interview and get to know you a little bit better. So the first question that I had was, how did you get started in tech?
I got started in tech trying to go to college to be a children's book writer, actually. And I was working at a terrible job for a semiconductor company in California. And they had me take a Dreamweaver class in 1998. And I fell in love with it. So I ended up dropping that job, and I got into a web design curriculum around new media at the end of the 90s, and graduated with high hopes of becoming a web designer. At the time, the internet bubble in California had really just crashed, so I really struggled finding work, and freelance was the thing that really got me started. The first paid gig I did for a surfboard and a camera, and I built a website for this guy.
Oh, wow.
And I've been coding ever since. Freelance was a really, really good thing for me, because the bigger jobs that I took on, they obviously required more and more intense programming. And it got to a point where I could leave the design stuff aside. And because I had strong skills in CSS and JavaScript at the time, which were hard to find, it just made it easier and easier to make a transition into coding. From there, I got jobs that just got better and better.
Awesome. So you talked about being a designer and a freelancer and working in JavaScript and things like that. Like, how did you go from that to now kind of that leadership role that you have today?
The leadership role was an interesting transition for me. It kind of came. It really started at LinkedIn. So in 2005, I took a job working for LinkedIn when it was a very, very small company. They had about 25 employees, and you guys edit the pauses out, right?
Yeah.
It just made me self-conscious.
Don't worry, no worries.
The company was small enough that there was only opportunities to lead. There was just nothing to do but pick up projects or pick up topics within the development organization, within hiring, within the product organization, and just run with it. Now, I worked for LinkedIn for 6 years, and when I really got burnt out on their product and culture, because it had just grown so much in the time that I was there, I came to Utah, and I came to take a job for Family Search, which is a nonprofit wholly owned by the LDS Church. And I didn't really have an understanding of how technology functioned outside of the Bay Area, let alone how it would function in a nonprofit that was religious. And
Right.
It was a huge shock to me, just like how far behind all the goofy things that they were doing from a technology perspective. And it made it really, really easy, feeling like I had seen how it could work and seeing how it was working, and just to close the gap between stuff. So that was really my first foray into any type of leadership. We put together a fairly large UI development team there, and then the next role after that just ended up becoming a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger after that.
Yeah, so and you've had several roles now where you've been the VP of engineering or the CTO, and you are in fact the CTO of Chargeback.
Currently the CTO of Chargeback. Now, CTO in Utah is a little bit different for me, and Chris and I have talked about this before, but in most cases, like, I've seen the CTO function as a small office of architects that are very forward-thinking about the technology of the business. I'm generally used to the VP of engineering being the one that's in charge of engineering and its delivery, meaning the people manager for the sum total of the software engineering team, and or basically the one who's working with the product organization to help things move along. So while I'm the CTO, I don't necessarily feel qualified for that because I really don't code all that much. I'm 2 companies in, I haven't even checked out the code base, so it's kind of schmucky as a CTO in my own mind.
So your role more then is managing people.
I see myself as an organizational leader more than anything. So with technology being new-ish in Utah, and maybe that's I don't mean it in a derogatory way, it kind of feels like a lot of the leaders that we have here don't necessarily have a firm grasp on some of the technical disciplines or the pieces of their business they really need to understand. So end up becoming a liaison between them and really helping the organization grow in terms of how it develops leaders, how it hires, how it organizes process, and how it works with product groups.
That's cool. Yeah. So, tell me a few things maybe that you like or dislike about that role.
Sure. I think that the key learning for me early on in my career is that if an organization had problems, there are very few organizations that you can just look at and say, like, man, these guys just can't get their software to work. Or these guys just can't get a product spec that looks decent enough to build. Like, underneath each one of those superficial problems, there's always some dysfunction that really sits in how the organization is structured, how the organization behaves, and even more to the point, like, who the people are on the organization. Mm-hmm. Goodness gracious, it's always the frickin' people. And like, learning that, like, it actually makes the people kind of the worst part of the job, but the flip side of it is it makes it the best. As me as a leader, like, I don't mind having pretty personal relationships with my folks that I end up working with, and that's really been a source of joy for me, is I can either watch somebody progress as an individual contributor, progress into management, or even grow out of the company onto bigger and better things than we could ever provide for them. So by far and away, the people have been the best thing about it.
So it sounds like you mentioned your time at LinkedIn, and then obviously coming here to Utah, that there are those little challenges that you come in and you're like, guys, this shouldn't be a challenge. I've got a bunch of solutions. Let's start organizing and doing it the right way, or certainly solving those problems, like how that sort of has helped you kind of grow into that leadership role.
Sure.
I'm curious, to dig a little bit more into the transition into Utah, and what are your feelings about Utah tech, maybe in more detail, not just that they're doing it a little differently or have done it differently than Silicon Valley, but what other things would you say that are interesting or good, bad, anecdotes about Utah tech?
Sure. Like, the technology's come a long way, and I know I got a rough start starting a family search just because it was, I think, in terms of the bell curve of where technology was in Utah, probably a little bit further back than maybe some of the more progressive companies in the area. And I think most of that's gone away, pretty much across Utah. Like, I find that we have fairly talented engineers here doing really, really good things. There's no shortage of them to me, in the sense that there just seems to be brilliant people to meet all the time that are doing really intense things. I feel like one of my anecdotes on Utah that I think I've struggled with is that it feels like the type of business that we're willing to fund here from a venture capital perspective has a certain tinge on it that's maybe more short-term focused than you would find in California. So like a company like Twitter that doesn't necessarily have a business model when it's inception, or something like Uber that's massively cash intensive over long periods of time, and they're going to get to like an M round of fundraising before they're going to turn a profit.
Yeah.
I don't know if like Utah's got the stomach for stuff like that from the venture capital population around here. So I think that makes it harder for engineers to really get excited about like the world-changing, life-changing stuff. So many of the companies around here feel like a remix on another idea, or an optimization, or even just a plain Me Too company of something that already exists, which is great from a short-term focus because that can build like a strong platform for us to grow off of.
Yeah, I mean, I love that you said that, kind of that it's really a strong platform to start with, and the investment is coming in now, right? Like, whereas 10 years ago, well, the investment wasn't even here.
Yeah.
There just wasn't a lot of that. So I think sort of more companies are seeing that, where investment companies, VCs and PE firms are now seeing a little bit more of that to hopefully in the near future have a little bit more of a stomach for it, the long-term investments.
Agreed. I think early on, like in Utah Tech, it felt like the sales team was one of the core drivers, or the core assets that made companies successful. And it feels like we're pivoting a little bit into the technology spaces, particularly as like the fintech companies are really starting to pop up everywhere. You know, Plaid's got an office here, and Divvy's doing really well, and Chargeify and Nav and Chargeback and others.
SoFi.
Canopy, SoFi,
MX,
you know, there's a bunch, right?
Yeah.
Goodness gracious, MX. Like that trend seems to be gaining momentum in a way where like it's easier for folks to at least look at that vertical.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I completely agree with you on that. And so in your teams and the success that you've had, like, I'm curious how you're able to measure that success in the engineering department. I think there are a lot of aspects of a growing company the VCs want to look at, but there's definitely some areas in engineering that are sort of difficult to, quantify value on. Like, I'm just curious from your perspective, like, where are you in terms of, looking at data and measuring success for your team?
Like, I really want to measure success on an individual level, and I know it's probably going to sound like a soft skills answer, because the truth is, for me, it really is. But I want an engineer to leave the company and be proud of the time that they spent at the organization that I led, speak highly of it enough to give a referral. Like, if we can get to that point, that means that on one hand, we're developing people in a good way. But it would also go to say that, like, at some point, like, that person was contributing in a way where our organization grew, helped them grow, or pushed them. So it's easy to look at it and say, okay, it's just revenue, or it's just user growth, or counts, or more subscribers, things like that. I think if I'm looking at the engineering organization, what I really want is I want referrals out of it. I want to build an alumni network out of the people that I've worked with before, so they're excited to come back. Now, that takes a long-term approach to what a leader needs to do, but I think that's baked into my own DNA about how I think about stuff. We don't, in the organizations that I'm a part of, generally speaking, we don't hire for project work, because there's no project that's more important than building the right organization, because if we have the right organization, the right projects will come out of that.
Sure.
So we'll meet a lot of people in a hiring context where we'd really like to hire them, but the timing's not right on their end. Maybe they're buying a house, they don't want to move, their spouse is pregnant or about to have a baby or something like that, or some upcoming trip or something like that. And we'll put off hiring somebody for 3 months or 6 months or even a year, like, if that's the case. It doesn't mean we have an offer and we hold a spot for them. But, like, we keep an open dialogue, because, like, we know that the key driver for us, the big flywheel, is when we have an organization of people that like each other, that work well together, that communicate well together, that have the right skills and bring the right talent to the table. And that's so much more than having just a butt in the seat to churn out some crappy code.
Yeah. So along those lines, I mean, what specifically are you doing to ensure that, to ensure that culture where everybody gets along and feels challenged?
Sure. In the current gig, one of the things that's great about it is we actually have a fairly complex engineering problem, in the sense that at its heart, it's a data aggregation problem where we're trying to pull data in together from a whole bunch of sources. But there's not necessarily a primary key that's associated with any of it. So there's a lot of inference about trying to take two records that we think might be right and then validate that it was the right thing. Having a technical problem seems to attract the right kind of engineer that we get excited about. But more than that, like, from the way that we manage and treat people, we always want to make sure that, like, the people come at the very heart of what we do. That's been critically important to me. A couple examples of this is really me and my own vulnerability and openness. If I can share the real challenges of my life, and I mean, like, the home ones, either with my kids or my spouse or my extended family, which is nuts, by the way, just pulling that all together in a way where if I can present that to somebody, then it makes somebody say, they have an opportunity when they say, I can't come into work, I'm sick. And it's easy for me to have a follow-up question and say, like, are you sure you're doing okay? Is this something we can do? Now, if the relationship's right, then the employee has the opportunity to be vulnerable themselves and share, yeah, I'm kind of doing okay, but my kid has this problem, I need to deal with it. Now, I wouldn't share this. I want to be careful about how I share this, because there's some sensitivity involved in it, but past employees of mine have told me things that, like, they make me feel like a close friend. They say, like, I had an employee that told me that his wife cheated on him. I had an employee that told me that his kid was abused. Employees going through divorce, like mental addictions, which is diagnosed with serious disease. I feel like if I'm positioning myself as a leader, more as a friend, where, like, I can understand and build a serious relationship with you, then when the trust is there, and the employee doesn't have a serious problem that they're going through, like their potential is so much more unlimited.
Yeah, that's awesome. You don't hear that a lot. I don't think, and at least in my own experience of getting really, really close with your managers, really, really close in your teams. Like sometimes it happens in the very small companies, but it's really difficult to find that.
I think it's time consuming is what it comes down to. Like, it means that when somebody has a question, I want to listen to them like a parent would listen to a child. And not in a condescending way, where like I want to somehow lord over somebody, but in a way where like I can hear what their problems are and help them.
So, Scott, we really appreciate you being here with us today and kind of sharing the details and getting into sort of some of these emotional topics as well. I think that our audience definitely loves to hear that sort of thing and get a better understanding of, it's not all just business numbers. I think there is, if you're going to go do this every single day, all day, most of the days, it should be something that you enjoy doing, working with people that you enjoy working with. And
yeah, for sure. One of my secrets to my own career has been my own divorce, actually. Maybe that sounds bad, but in divorce I struggled for closure. And I turned to self-help books about relationships, interpersonal communication styles, about marriage, and even about dating and different things. And it really became clear that the difference between a self-help book and a management leadership book, is so doggone paper thin. It really comes down to the anecdotes that they talk about it. Except in a management book, they don't actually go to the point of any vulnerability. They really want to stay hands-off as much as possible. That's helped me a ton, just be able to work with people, understand people, and really come together with them.
Yeah, it seems like, and I think you touched on this a little bit, Chris, but we tend to this is business, this is work, we're going to keep things professional and keep things private. But, I think forming meaningful relationships with other humans really, you do require that kind of vulnerability.
It's so much more fun, too.
Yeah, it makes work better.
So you mentioned that Chargeback's hiring. What's the easiest way for people to get a hold of you if they have any more questions or they want to understand more about Chargeback?
Sure. I'm happy to go to lunch with anyone who's listening. I'm on LinkedIn. Look me up. My last name's hard to spell, but do your best.
Yeah, we'll put it on the episode, hopefully spelling it right. So again, thanks everybody for being here on the Utah CTO Show. And just a quick reminder, we're on Instagram. You can find us there at Utah CTO Show. We'd also really like to appreciate it if you're liking our podcast, if you could leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening, because those reviews and ratings are helping us get our podcast in front of the eyes of other people looking for similar material. So thanks very much.
Thank you.